Welcome back, Academy I3 podcast listeners. This is your host, Charlie Rod Newson. We're very excited to bring on a guest today to talk a little bit more about emergency practices in the field. So let me turn it over to our guest to introduce herself and start talking a little bit more about her experience.
Hi, everyone, and thank you for the introduction, Charlie. My name is Jovanni Holloway, and I'm so excited to be here. I was with the County of San Bernardino and Riverside Department of Social Services and Children and Family Services, San Bernardino County, a total of over 10 years of experience between child welfare and social services. And so I'm excited to share about that. And currently, I'm a licensed clinical social worker. So I have my own private practice now, but I still train in the field of social work with the Academy. So excited to be here.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And yeah, this has been an episode that has been of interest to a lot of the folks at the Academy. I think a lot of folks in the field as well to really think about how do we look forward in terms of different practices that can be looking into by the counties, looking into by organizations to see how do we incorporate different ideas, different approaches, or just what's going to be upcoming in the future. Yeah, I think a first place that we can start is to really explore a little bit about how your past experiences have informed a little bit to where you're at now.
Okay, so going way, way back to when I was in my Master's of Social Work program, there I was taking classes and trained to become a social worker. Specifically, I was a CalSWEC recipient. My education was paid for with the agreement that I would work for the county that chose me for Children and Family Services to give 2 years of time back. I definitely went way over the 2 years because I love the work so much. And so that's the education background on that. Prior to that, though, I did work for the Department of Social Services with Riverside County. And my job there basically was in the Welfare to Work program. Amazing program. It helped a lot of single parents or parents, even if it was two parents that were under a certain income threshold, and with the assistance of eligibility technicians and even sometimes social workers who would come and help them to just get ready, literally ready to work. Some of them would be going to school. Some of them would be working while also trying to get employment. And so it was just a streamlined process where the parent gave buy-in into what they wanted their future to look like. And then the county would come on the side and assist them. In that program, I had direct contact with our different clients that we helped. And then I also developed some handbooks that, from what I understand, are in use to this day for Riverside County that really explained how to apply for the FAFSA, which is federal student aid. What steps do you need to apply to a junior college? What steps do you need to apply to a four-year university, to a Cal State, to the University of California, one of their 9 schools, I believe it's 9, and just those different processes. So it was really amazing. I enjoyed doing that and working with those families. But it was there that I realized I want to be like a social worker. It really put the stamp in for me. I was thinking about it before and transitioning from the University of California, Davis. That is my alma mater. That's where I got my degree in sociology, minor in African American studies. And I think I got a minor in Spanish too. I can't remember, but I do speak Spanish and I learned at the university as well and did a study abroad program in Cuba. So that really helped. But all of that to say, because it was a research university, it had the emphasis in social services, but not just social work by itself. So I just did different internships with different ways of helping people. But after graduation and in that transition period to going on to my master's, that's when I also fully discovered I wanted to do that. A lot of us in this field are typically in this field because of personal experience, whether we've gone through something or we know someone who's gone through something. And in my case, it was a bit of both. I went through different things through the mental health sector, and then I knew people who also went through things. So naturally, I just got really attached to just wanting to help people. Yeah.
Awesome, awesome. That's amazing how you really detailed out just like how your educational experience, how your own lived experience has really informed like what brought you into this field in general. And I think you're speaking pretty spot on. There's a purpose that brings folks really into this field, and especially in the helping field, it's something that is sometimes I hear people say it's like a calling. Sometimes I hear people say that they really want to give back and really help advance the field even more. With that, I think it brings a lot of just a balance as well of how do we still become motivated by that while also being able to manage how we work on the day to day. So I think one of the things that we talked about in our pre-meeting is really thinking about what that looks like on a stress level. And so I think to some extent, mostly I hear a lot from workers that there is this managing of their stress. So can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yes, this is definitely a hot topic with anyone in the social services sector, but especially child welfare social workers. Before I get to the nitty-gritty of that, there were some statistics that were taken. I can't remember the study right off the top of my head, but it basically asked the top 10 most stressful jobs in our countries in the United States, and what does it look like? What are the different things? Emergency room, doctor ranked really high up there, nursing really ranked high up there. What also ranked high, it was in the top five, was child welfare social workers. And I was like, finally, somebody has highlighted us because during the pandemic, which we're now in 2024, right? So in 2020, everything's getting shut down. March, we were told not to come in the offices anymore. Some of us, like myself, were taken out of our regular positions and literally thrown back onto the line emergencies. During that time in life, doctors were really the unsung heroes, I feel like at times, but more than just doctors, social workers. We were out there risking our health, risking time away from our family, everything. And we signed up for it, right? So I'm not saying this with a complaint. I'm just saying the way the population viewed and respected, I think, other practices, especially in the medical field. There are medical social workers who also died during that time. And so I just want to mention that that was an incredible amount of stress to the point that myself and other workers had to take stress leave. I never did in all those years of working, but at that time I had to because it became so overwhelming. And so, something that's important to stay in this career is managing your stress. And that's a huge emerging practice that I think is just getting more attention since I've been a social worker and just working in social services, that people are really seeing who helps the helper, who's the one who's going to be a support to the person supporting all these, right? We have one individual who is potentially connected to 50 to 100 families. That's a lot for one person. Again, no complaints. It's just the facts. And I was raised in the self-care culture. All social workers in the state of California have to take Common Core classes. Right now, we are in Common Core 3.5. So that is what we are all trained in. It is a statewide training. Everyone gets the same training. It just might be a few little tweaks and differences per your county. And so, again, when I was coming up, I think it was Common Core 3.0 or 3.2. So I'm aging myself by saying that. So it was some time ago. And one of the trainings that we had was, I think it was called Healing, yeah, Healing the Healer. And it was one of those trainings that stuck with me my entire career. I want to say it was towards the end of all of our other trainings. And then we had that one, and I really discussed a lot about work-life balance, how to manage your stress when you've seen something traumatic. Of course, we're in this field and in this career because we love it, but at the same time, there's some heartbreaking things that we'll see. We'll see children who have been severely abused, neglected, sometimes unto death, right? And you take that home, right? And so that class really taught us, how do you balance it? How do you keep work at work and home at home. Unfortunately, that class is not offered anymore, and I want to be an advocate to bring it back. I'll even teach it because it makes you excited about social work, but it helps you to take care of yourself. And yeah, that was just an amazing training. But all of that to say, that's a part of my foundation, right? And I truly believe to this day, I survived and flourished in that career for as long as I did because I was at my foundation. So I had all the technical things, had all the training about what to do when you're considering there's a potential for removal for a child, had all that background, but I also got what do you do when you want to come home and you want to cry? You want to come home and your heart's broken because the family that you've worked so hard to keep together has now had to separate permanently because mom or dad didn't do what was needed to be done to keep them together. How do you deal with that, especially for individuals who have young ones at home? It's a lot. How to deal with transference, that I'm not projecting onto my clients or letting their projections come onto me. So it takes practice, but yeah, again, that was just an amazing class. Great tips. I remember coming home from a lot of my trainings and watching Disney movies because that was recommended by one of our trainers to help us manage stress, and especially after seeing really sad photos, things that could be very triggering. It was like, hey, go home and get an influx of just beautiful, positive images from your favorite Disney movies. And some Disney movies can be heartbreaking, but for a lot of us, they're nostalgic and they're fun because you know what's going to happen. So it would be like I found myself in that season watching cartoons. Definitely my faith became a big thing for me. I am identified as a Christian. I am a Christian. And so for me, prayer and being a part of my community was a big part of my self-care. So whatever practice spiritually people had, they were encouraged to press into that, into community, right? Not being isolated. And that's something that I feel nowadays more and more social workers are beginning to see that's important. You do the work, but you have to keep home life as well. So yeah.
Beautifully said. Yeah, I think the speak about like self-care has been just a recurring topic for some time now. And I think there's sort of an evolution of that as well. I think it's looking at not just self-care, but it's also like how do we become proactive with that? How do we make it so that it's an active practice that continues, that isn't just a one-time thing or an as-needed thing as well? Because part of that is also thinking about on the front end of it, how do we build our window of tolerance? So how do we build sort of our capacity to take on some of the harder parts of our jobs while at the same time when things do become challenging, we are going to be impacted, but it's how do we manage that impact to where we have people that we can turn to. We have, like you said, we can go home and have some time away while watching cartoons, watching something that's positive, or having faith, like you mentioned. So there's so many different ways where we can build sort of our window of tolerance and then at the same time be able to have something we can turn to when we need it the most. So yeah, thank you for highlighting such an important topic there. The next thing that I think was really neat that you talked about that really stood out to me before when we met was just talking about the diversity of the workforce that's now in place. And so there's such an evolution of that as well. And there's such even the diversity of approaches that we're meeting our workers where they're at and some of the different diverse backgrounds. So please share a little bit more about that.
Yeah, this is great, a great topic because we just see a huge inclusion of different minorities in the field of social work. We also see a huge inclusion of different gender identifying individuals as well. And I feel that it's really important to our practice to understand where everyone comes from. We all don't share the same background, we all don't have the same views, but it's important to always have love and respect at the basis of how we view each other. And therefore, this impacts the clientele that we engage with. And for example, if I have a teenager that is a part of the LGBTQI community, and even if I don't identify as that, I may know a coworker who is a part of that community. And not that they can speak for everyone in the community they're representing, but I could have a conversation and say, hey, could you help me with the best way I can support this teenager? What resources are you familiar with? Is there anything you wish that was around when you were a teenager at that time of discovering who you are and a part of your process? Can you share that with me? And that's why it's just so important to see just the amazing diversity that we have in our different organizations. It helps a lot. And along with that, a part of being a social worker, a good social worker, is always thinking of trauma-informed practices and also cultural awareness. So it goes back to knowing someone's culture can be a strength for them, right? And so knowing that if, for example, in a lot of our indigenous native communities, deference is very important. So making sure before I talk to the youngest person in the room that I'm speaking to the elder first. That shows that I care, that I have love and respect for their culture. But what if I don't know what's important to them? Then I ask, can you tell me what is important in your life, with your family, with your community? What are some of those tenets that are very important to you? And then they can share that with me, and then we can have a productive conversation from there. And so a part of these emerging practices, and as someone who helps conduct the trainings, it for future social workers, always considering someone's background, it's so necessary. I can think of so many stories where a social worker, even if they didn't share the same background as the person they were helping, but because they took that extra step to find out and to ask questions, it made the trust and the empathy and the connection with that family remain stronger. They had better outcomes because the family felt they had some buy-in from the social worker. When they have that buy-in, they're going to want to work together to get these goals done. And yeah, those are some really huge things to keep in mind with diversity and different backgrounds.
Awesome, awesome. Yeah, no, I love how you talked about just that slowing down process of really being intentional of either we may have known some of culturally responsive practices that we can bring in with different cultures and families, but at the end of the day, it's we're not intended to know everything. However, we can really take that step to inquire. I think that's probably the best way to really approach it is having that sense of I don't know. Let me pause. Let me inquire with, like you said, a coworker or with the families themselves. And I would imagine that can have a huge impact because some families may not even have had anybody who's thought to stop and ask because they had to go to the next thing or nobody had stopped to even consider that. So I think that can be incredibly powerful for families. There was one thing I would love to hear about. You had mentioned in when we did our prep meeting about just a diversity social committee that you were part of and just an event that took place. So please share with our audience about that.
Yes, and excuse all the allergies, everyone. Yes, we had some amazing things at San Bernardino County where we worked so hard. I was a part of a social committee, which sounds like we just put on parties and things like that. And it wasn't just about that, it was about really keeping the camaraderie and just the overall aura of the office heightened. We went through some rough times together in San Bernardino County, especially when we had the terrorist situation, right? SB Strong. We were there during all of that. So we had to think of ways to keep people feeling excited to want to come into the office physically, to keep people encouraged that they are seen in the importance of the work that they're doing, that they're noted. And so that was a part of what we did as a social community. But also a part of our task were the diversity committee, which was like a subcommittee of the social committee. And the goal was to bring education for our clientele. And for example, we unfortunately have a very large percentage, there's a lot of disproportionality between African American children and Latino children that are overrepresented in the population for just the overall numbers in child welfare services. It's a huge problem. And because of that, and that's another topic, right? I can't get too in detail about that, but just to stay focused on this question, a part of that, because we have so many Black and brown children who will be placed with caregivers that are not of the same ethnicity as them, how do we support these foster parents with caring for their hair? Caring for curly, textured hair, for thicker hair that does not always have to be washed every day, but it still needs to be washed. Hair where it's false to think that Black children cannot receive lice when they can. All of these things that are floating out there, how do you teach people how to care for these children? When I would see kids that were on my caseload come into the office and their hair was unkempt, I always said something to the caregiver, and not in a mean way. It was very much a pull you to the side. Let's have a conversation because their dress looks good, they look good, but the hair, what's going on? And it would simply be, I just don't know how to do it. So sometimes we would come up with a plan where, let's say, the mother of her children, they're having supervised visits. Mom would bring in hair supplies, and once a week, the child's hair was being done in the office. All caregiver had to make sure was the child's hair was washed and conditioned, and then bring freshly washed hair, and then mom's doing the hair together. There's been other cases where washing and conditioning happened at our office, and I let them go in the bathroom and I'm watching and they're doing the hair. Not only was that a bonding experience between the parent and the child, but it also was advocating for that caregiver to support that caregiver with the child's hair getting done. So we would just discuss creative ways that we can help support and educate the population that we were serving. So that's an example with the hair and using the parent to be a part of the solution for that. Another one that we did that I'm so proud of to this day is we did a natural hair care forum. And so we contacted local beauticians in the area. We also contacted a beauty school in the area and said, hey, we're calling on behalf of Children and Family Services, and just share with them about who we are, what we are as an organization, because there can be negative stereotypes out there about us. So we're letting them know what our purpose is, what we're here to do, and how we would love to partner with them to come and put together a hair care forum where basically they would teach our foster parents, oftentimes foster parents who were a different ethnicity of the children they were caring for, but not only, there were definitely parents of the same ethnicity who just didn't know how to do hair. So everyone could get the education. But we said, hey, could you come in, bring some supplies, and give recommendations on how to care for children's hair? And we told them about a lot of our Black and brown children being one of the biggest populations that we are helping. Can you give us some ideas? And they loved it. They loved it. People came, had some really great interactions there. Funny enough, the day of the forum, they had to record it for me, even though I was the point person, put everything on because I had another training, not with the academy, but it was a required training I needed for my department. And I was selected from our then deputy director. It was actually a really huge honor, the training that I got to attend. It was 3 days, all that. And it literally just all lined up on the same day. So I got a recap through the video and everything, but the day of, the morning of, I'm calling, making sure everybody's in place. But yeah, when they're there though, they would teach, talk about the basics of hair care, the difference between Latino children, African American children with oils and textures, how one ethnic group may require hair washing every day, why another does not require that, and what that looks like, and how long is too long to go without washing, and what's too often, all those different types of things. So they did that. And then another thing we asked of them was, could you, because also it's business for them. We're like, hey, could you offer a discount to some of our caregivers who you've taught them all these things, they can keep it in mind. But if they're also like, it just be one less thing off my plate, can I make an appointment with you to take care of my foster child's hair? And a lot of times they were just with it. So they offer a discount to our children who were impacted by the system, who would come in and get their hair done. So that was an amazing event. That is a huge emerging practice I feel like all counties should take a part in. It should be mandatory. I try to push it so that can this be something we do all the time? But also keep in mind, we are social workers with a full caseload. We solve all of our children and parents and caregivers and nephrons, everyone else that we're staying connected with. And this is something that took time and planning. Is that reasonable? Maybe not. When we were doing it, it wasn't. We were already at the top of our caseloads, but we knew this was something. And we also wanted to do it to prove how effective it would be. Because also we had to invite the caregivers to the meeting. So that also means they're taking time out of their schedules. They have to do pickups for our foster children they were helped take care of. We have to figure all of that out. And so it's really learning how to integrate the two so that it's helpful and not a burden on someone. But that is something that I'm so proud of, and I just think is a great idea for anyone, looking to improve practices in their county and strengthen the relationship between the caregivers and the social worker and the children. Do a program like that. You'll get a really good response, I believe. So yeah.
Nice. Yeah, you gave a great example of yes and. It's yes, like these are things that I would imagine workers are probably thinking in the back of their mind. Yes, like why wouldn't we want to do something like this? Why wouldn't we want to really engage the community and engage social work in itself like that? And there's also the other piece that you mentioned, which is very true, the caseloads. There's just an immense amount of caseload at this time. And I think that carries over really perfectly to our next topic, which is talking about just like state and federal policies and laws around what does that look like for caseloads and how do workers even have a chance to be able to think about doing programs like that in the same instance that they're managing their caseloads? So, yeah, can you share a little bit more about just what the policies and laws could inform us on?
Yes, a little bit of my background with working with some of the policy side of it. And so I was a CFSR, Child Family Services Reviewer, and that is a program that was between the county and the state level. So I worked on a system for the county. And then on the state level, I was in another system. So it's called OMS, where basically we had a 18 item review, which also was a result of our system improvement program, SIP is the acronym, where we would go through these different questions and interviewing social workers, parents, the children when they were age appropriate, and different partners that were surrounded in that case to see what areas we could have improvements on. And so this is a program that ultimately is across all the states, and it's actually at the federal level. So every single state is a part of CFSR or has a CFSR process. How it's carried out can vary from state to state, but everyone is involved in it. All of that to say, most counties and children and family services has a policy department where certain rules and regulations are being initiated, but they always have an overhead from the state level. And so from the state level, um, we have what's called ACLs or all county letters, where they've gotten some instructions from the feds that says, hey, Here is an updated item that says all children under 13 must receive a physical no matter what. Now, I just made that up, okay, just as an example. That's not like the exact verbiage, but it'll say something like that. And then it'll have all these points and different things of what this is about. But it's an all county letter because it's going out to all the counties. Specifically, I'm talking about California. And they have a deadline to get that initiated. From that all county letter, it's sent to our, policy department within our agency, and then they write it out to integrate it into all of our, rules and regulations and policy that we have as an agency. And the desired goal is between policymakers and social workers that there is some connection, that someone who's actually doing the work can go. For California, our capital is Sacramento, that can go and represent there in some type of way. Prior to my career starting at Children and Family Services, there was a individual who did that for our county, who would go, I think, just about once a month, and would lobby and speak about the different things that we're needing as social workers. So that position, from the last time that I've known about it, it hasn't been filled, and it's not something they do anymore. They're doing it in a different way now. But that's the idea. Can we get someone to advocate at that level who understands what we're going through as social workers, what we need? And so a lot of these efforts have been successful in some ways, and other ways they have not. For example, we now have at San Bernardino County, and I'm so proud to be a part of this action, we have a union now. We have SEIU, where prior to that, we had something else that just wasn't working for us. SEIU has helped bring the San Bernardino County in particular to a level of salary, and this just overall influence of the demands that we had back then. A popular thing that a lot of social workers push for is caseload caps. Can I help the families that I want to help if I have over blank amount of cases? How can I give my all to that? And I want to say this is one of the counties that does have it. And if anyone's listening and I'm wrong, please forgive me. But from my understanding, San Diego County has some caseload caps for some of their programs. And in working with some of the San Diego County staff, I'll learn, wow, you guys aren't allowed to have more than 30 or 35. That's amazing. But also the standards that come with that smaller caseload, but you got to do just as much work, right? Which is good. We want to do the best for our children and our families. And social workers can request this in a lot of different ways. So what I've seen from my personal experience is the union really stepping in, to the point for some people striking. Right now, Kaiser Permanente, Southern California, Kaiser Permanente, the LCSWs, the licensed clinical social workers, are on an active strike. We are going on week 3. Yikes. That is something, though, that they felt. And I'm saying yikes because for both sides, the clients that aren't being seen, and then on their side, where they're willing to lose their money to care for their families because of what they're experiencing as injustice. That's huge. There are different ways to get there, different paths to get there. Ultimately, the better, going back to like our self-care conversation, the better care the providers are, the better care we're going to see in the clientele that we're treating. Treat your workers, they're going to retain. Treat your workers, they're going to push for these different things to get done. Overwhelm your workers, they're going to want to leave. Overwhelm your workers, they're not going to want to stay. And so that's I know I'm transitioning into another topic about retention and stuff, so I'll stop there. But yeah, that's what the process looks like.
It's like you should be a podcast host. You are just rolling so perfectly into our different topics. Yeah, for our last topic of today, and this will be a little bit of a teaser, if you will, into the next episode we'll have with the different guests. But I think one of the things we can look to talk about is, like you mentioned, that workforce retention piece of it. It's that, and that is a challenge right now that's within just different counties across the state of how do we retain our staff to where, of course, we want to bring in more staff, which is great, but then there's a hiring piece to that, there's cost to that, but then it's like, how do we, with the staff that we do have, support them and really empower them to retain them, honestly, because we've probably had wonderful staff over the years that have been amazing, but have reached this point, like you said, of injustice, of just burnout, and they're just at their ends. And so, can you speak a little bit more about that briefly around the topic of workforce retention?
Yes, another committee. I was in a lot of committees over the years was the Recruitment and Retention Committee. And our goal is just like it sounds. What are our efforts to recruit new social workers? That would look like social workers who were completing their master's in social work program, social workers who were graduating from their MSW program, and they're looking for where to work next. They've got their master's, now they need to work somewhere. Another part of it was the retention. Okay, so once we have the social workers here, how do we get them to stay? Um, Turnover rates can be very high in child welfare services. And so this is going back to my MSW program. I had the opportunity to write a thesis with my amazing thesis partner. And I don't want to say her name in case she doesn't want me to put her out there, but she does trainings for the academy too. But yeah, we wrote a paper on retention for our county. So we were able to do anonymous surveys that were dispersed to all of the different offices across our San Bernardino County. And San Bernardino County is the second largest county in the state of California. And so it was a lot of places that this survey went. We got all the information back. And then we continue to write our thesis based on that. And all of that to say, what we found out was supervision and management were the number one factors that help someone determine if they're going to stay with an organization or not, which I thought was so surprising because we would think just money, right? Not that money didn't rank up there, it just wasn't number one. Most people were like, no, it depends on my supervisor and my management team that's going to help me stay here. Because that goes back to my previous statement. You have that buy-in, right? The buy-in on this side is going to help the buy-in on the other end. It all works together, it's all connected. And with that being said, our efforts as a committee looks like for the recruitment side, going to job recruitment events, sometimes on the weekends, sometimes late in the evening after work. We would go set up a table with our big old sign saying, come and see us. Let us tell you all about our department. We would have our booklets, our pamphlets of all the information about our department. And it'd be like, let's just come together and let's talk about this and why you should work with us for your child welfare career. So that was pretty amazing to do. It was cool to see people signing up. But again, it came down to time. We already have a lot on our plate. This is an additional thing that we could do on the side, but it takes time. If you already have these overwhelming caseloads, how are we going to make time for this? And then the same thing on the retention side. Once they came, how can we keep them here? So sometimes there will be surveys given out about that too. What do you need to see changed in our organization? What are the improvements that you would like to see? And then sometimes there would be a little bit of pushback from management about those surveys. So hands could be tied on all sides, right? But the biggest part of people staying is they want to not only feel appreciated, they want the support. And they want the support from their management. I have a story, which I told a lot of those todays, where someone was in a position and they enjoyed the position. But when their supervisor was getting transferred to another program, they requested to go with that supervisor. They said, and I quote, I will not stay here if I cannot be under this supervisor, because they have been with that supervisor for 8 years. 8 years, two children in that time. And I mention that because that supervisor worked with that individual schedule. So she was still able to drop off kids at school, pick up kids from school, and then little activities that would come along the way while still getting her job done. So maybe it wasn't just a traditional 9 to 5, 8 to 5 hours. It might have been at different points, not all the time, but where it's like, oop, I have to put in a weekend, 4 hours to finish up these reports because my kid got sick at school this week and I couldn't work on my report at home. Different things like that. That's also where telecommuting became really big during the pandemic, where we had a laptop and we had a phone so we could VPN in, hotspot in to our system to get things done while taking care of family at home. For everyone had different backgrounds, not everyone had necessarily children waiting on them at home, but just their different responsibilities. Or like myself, it was just me. But that was still hard when you're used to seeing people every day and then living totally by yourself. So everyone had their different things that they were overcoming. But all of that to say that retention part, I think to this day, what helps us are the trainings, the Common Core trainings that all social workers are required to take. That helps immensely when someone has the education to do their job outside of their traditional degree. A degree is one thing, but putting it into practice is another thing. Having those trainings, having a support staff, office assistants are amazing, but they're not always around when it comes to funding, when it comes to position openings. There's not always a budget for an OA, which is so unfortunate because when you have an amazing office assistant, they go over and beyond. They're printing out documents for you. They're doing these tasks that take time, and they are such a huge role in the team that can make child welfare a success. Our office assistant in the unit that I came from in the beginning of my social work career, she could have whatever she wanted. She wanted coffee, we got her coffee. She wanted lunch, we got her lunch because we're like, girl, we appreciate you. We're going to give you everything you need. And also, we really did. We really appreciated her. Come in. I remember all of us one year were working on Christmas Eve because we all had court reports due. She was the only one who was like, I'll come in because she had to get the margins right and all these different things for us to turn in our reports, but we made it happen. All that to say, that is support, having that staff assistance, and then yes, your supervision, the person that a lot of times has more experience than you, them pouring their knowledge into you, taking the time to caseload counsel with you, all of those things, it makes a huge difference. And so just seeing that transition and that timing to help people to stay, it makes such a huge difference.
Ah, I love when folks get enthusiastic and just passionate about what they're talking about because it really shows just how like connected you are with the workforce and connected we are with just the important things that impact the workforce as well. And what's interesting is we I think even through our time today we've dived into what are those emergency practices that folks may not have heard about, may not have considered, or that would be like, whoa, we hadn't thought about doing like a hair care forum in our county, but that could be something we could be interested in. And there's the piece that you just finished up with, which was getting back to basics, getting back to those relationship pieces, getting back to just how do we show value and appreciation and support for our staff, which is not anything new. It's just getting back to something that can help on such a deep level. And it can be just as straightforward as that. Obviously, there's a lot of, like you said, dynamics that play into this. But it's also thinking it doesn't have to be something so innovative that we haven't even thought about. But it's no, these are things that can really impact people on such a deep level, and it's right in front of us. Yeah. Ah, thank you so much for this conversation. I think it's wonderful to be able to think in different ways about something that impacts a lot of us in the field. And so I know you left off with a really passionate piece that really spoke to our audience, but is there any sort of last takeaways that you would like to share with our audience just on this topic today?
I would just say for all my fellow social workers, you're appreciated. Your work is um, so important. Please do not undervalue what you do. Um, and just know that even if it's not being spoken upon publicly, you're seen and you're heard. I encourage you, if you are feeling any levels of burnout, to potentially seek therapeutic support. We deal with a lot of trauma, and believe it or not, therapists see other therapists. And even for yourself, even if you're not a therapist, you are a social worker, get that support because we want you around for a lot of years. It's okay to change positions and grow. Do what you're passionate about. And just know that you're appreciated and seen, and take every opportunity to go to trainings, to educate yourself, build your mind up so that you're never just thinking one way. The diversity in thought is going to make you not only a marketable social worker, but it's going to make you a social worker with an edge because you're going to learn how to connect to different audiences and different groups. And so I just really encourage you to stay motivated, stay educated. We have CEUs for a reason. Keep them going, and it's going to be great for you. And I just wish everyone well in their careers. And from a non-social worker audience, I hope you learned something new today. And yeah, it's just been so great. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to just share from my personal experiences and professional experiences.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Giovanni. All right. Thank you so much to our listeners for listening to this episode of the Academy I3 podcast. Stay tuned for more episodes this season as we dive into other topics that are going to really be impactful for the workforce. We'll see you soon. Thank you.